what part did you play in that raid? Now listen carefully to this. He said, I was the lead pilot of a group of 9 aircraft. Our assigned targets were the airplanes and the hangars on Ford Island. That's where I was. He said, when I went in for my first run, dropped my bomb, machine gun, I didn't see a soul. It was like the whole island was asleep. But he said, we were surprised how fast they reacted, because by the time I had came around and was lining up for my second run, there was so much fire coming up that I turned and went elsewhere. Oh, I would have loved to talk to him. There's the guy that dropped the very first bomb to fall at Pearl Harbor that morning. That's the guy that dropped the bomb that got to me physically, spilt of my blood, surely some of the first, if not the very first blood to fall at Pearl Harbor that morning. But in spite of that, I think I'm the guy, or at least one of the guys, that got to him mentally with that on-target 50 caliber machine gun fire and changed his mind about coming back and machine gunning us the second time. In 2010, I joined the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association in 2010. I was too busy before that to get involved. Anyway, my dear sweet wife, daughter, son-in-law, and I went to Pearl Harbor for that anniversary. There was about 100, 115 of my fellow survivors there. I think each and every one of them had been back to Pearl Harbor a number of times in those passing years. For me, that was the first time back to Pearl Harbor in 64 years. After we attended the memorial service and the rededication of the Visitor Center that morning, I boarded one of those white boats, went out aboard the USS Arizona Memorial. That hadn't been built when I was last there. Standing there on the deck of that memorial and look over the side at the hull of that vessel resting there on the harbor, all those names there on the honor wall, and know that those are the names of 1,177 crew members whose earthly remains are still down there, still aboard that vessel over which you're then standing. It was a lot different than when I seen it explode that long, long ago morning, burn days afterward, then lying and sitting there on the bottom of the harbor each and every time I passed by on the Liberty boat or in and out of the harbor on other assignments further down the South Pacific, all during World War II. You know, it's for those of you who have been there, a different feeling than you've ever had anywhere else, right?
Yes.
Guaranteed, guaranteed. Anyway, the next day, in the accompaniment of a naval historian, which we had been able to arrange through Major General Ron Lowe. A lot of you guys know him, bless his soul. Anyway, we were able to go on to Ford Island to some of the highly restricted areas. That hangar that I was in is restricted. Anyway, on the way there, we stopped by the USS Utah Memorial, paid our respects, honor, and remembrance to those crew members still aboard that vessel. Then around to the harbor inlet end of the island. When we approached there, it looked a lot different because the only hangar left standing is the one that I was in that morning. The others are gone. I got once again to stand on the very spot where that first bomb fell that morning that got to me. Standing there, it was almost like the whole thing was happening all over again. You know, you could almost hear the sounds, you could see the sights, you could smell the gunpowder, feel the recoil of that machine gun. It was like it was all happening again. We got to go inside the hangar. I wanted to go up to that office if I could, but that closed off. I couldn't get up there because somewhere there that morning, between that office, that ditch that I was ordered into, threatened with military discipline for leaving, or in that gun blister where I was firing that 50 caliber machine gun, I lost that 17-year-old sailor. Those of you who have been in such activities will maybe remember that it can take your youth from you very, very suddenly. I tell people, I went to my duty station that morning, I was a 17-year-old native sailor boy. I think by the time that day was over, I felt more like about a 34-year-old vet, you know what I mean? When we left the hangar and walked around the end, I was able to point out to my wife the very window pane that stuff would have had to come through to get to me, because I was sitting with my back to the window. My shoulders would have been about windowsill height, And so it's the bottom window, and those windows replacements are a lighter color, clearer than were the old milky colored old windows. If you're ever looking at it from what would be the southeast or the end of the building, those windows are 12 by 12 panes in all of this deal, and there's groups of them. A group of windows, a column, another group of windows, a column, and the third group of windows, the bottom window pane. That's the one I was saying. We get around the back of that hangar, and I'm looking, I asked him, I said, do we go around the back of the hangar? He said, sure. So we went back there. I'm looking around, and I'm kicking around. And he said, what are you looking for anyway? I said, I'm looking for some sort of a sign of a ditch that was out here somewhere that we were ordered into and then threatened with military discipline when we left to put up a defense. He said, wait a minute. Tell me that again. He said, there's something really, really funny here. So I told him exactly what happened, and I think he's disbelieving me, so I'm telling him, I said, and what I'm telling you is the honest to God's truth. I'll swear to it on a stack of Bibles, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, Articles of Faith, Words of Wisdom, and on my dead mother's grave. He said, no. He said, I believe every word you're telling me. But he said, what's so funny? Of all the people that I've talked to down through the years who were right here that morning, many of them a number of times, you're only the second person that's ever mentioned that ditch. Well, it's not funny to me. If I had spent that morning in that ditch like I was ordered to do and then threatened with military discipline for leaving, I wouldn't be standing proudly before you here tonight and sharing that experience with you. When we got home from that event, my dear sweet wife said to me, what was it like to go back there after all these years, you know? Well, I hadn't really thought much about it. In fact, the first time I ever talked about it was with a small group, well, it was supposed to be a small group of about 14 people. It ended up to be about, well, they had 80 chairs set up and there was overflow. And I was expecting just to discuss it with a group of young men. Anyway, our youngest son, our oldest son, was approaching his 53rd birthday, right? Mike was approaching his 53rd birthday. And when we got home, he told my wife, he said, I didn't know Dad was a Pearl Harbor survivor. We just never talked about it. Anyway, so I started thinking about it, and, all of those bombs falling, those airplanes diving, the machine gun rattle, the ships exploding, capsizing, sinking, the bodies floating in the water for days afterwards and stuff like that, and so she said, you've got to write something down, or you've got to record something so your family and people will know what happened to you when you were only 17 years old. So I started thinking about it, and boy, when I did, them thoughts kept rushing back into my mind, and I knew that if I didn't jot them down, they would be gone. So I would grab a piece of paper, we'd be sitting at a meal, I'd push the plate aside, I'd write down what I was thinking, or I'd be out in my little shop out in the backyard working. I still work. I don't work a regular schedule, but I provide a specialty service to the construction industry on an on-call basis. And if I can keep doing this now till this coming April 3rd, which is about 4 months and 1 day away, on that day then I will have been a working, wage-earning, tax-paying, service-providing, productive, contributing, and self-supporting member of my generation for 75 consecutive years. When I make that date, then I'm going to aim for 80.